That was the single word the HOA president of Sundance Estates spoke into a microphone hidden inside a dye bomb package the moment she opened the lid in her clubhouse storage closet on a Saturday afternoon in August. By the time she walked back out of that closet, her face, her hands, her hair, and the inside of her white capri pants were a vivid fluorescent magenta that would not wash off with anything you could buy at a CVS. She had been stealing packages from Sundance Estates residents for 6 years. 47 of them belonged to me. The rest belonged to 22 of my neighbors over the age of 70. She thought she was opening a Yeti tumbler. She was actually opening federal mail theft charges that came with a U.S. postal inspector parked 4 blocks away in an unmarked Crown Vic. Tell me below, would you have stopped her or rigged the bomb yourself? Sundance Estates at Anthem is a 112-home gated subdivision on the south slope of the Black Mountain foothills outside Henderson, Nevada, with red tile roofs, white stucco walls, and a clubhouse with 2 heated pools my wife Susanna calls the bathtubs of the damned. We bought our place in 2019, 3 years before I retired out of the Nevada Department of Public Safety Crime Lab in Las Vegas, where I'd spent 30 years working forensic chemistry, accelerants, pigments, fiber dyes, and the occasional unexploded ordnance some sheriff's deputy would haul into the lab in a paper grocery sack like it was a pumpkin. My name is Theron Whitlock. I am 68. I have a small pension from the state of Nevada, a basement consulting practice doing chemical analysis for civil attorneys, and a granddaughter named Posey in Long Beach, who FaceTimes me every Sunday so she can show me what she taught the dog that week. The packages started disappearing in May. The first 3 were small: a pair of replacement filters for Susanna's nebulizer, a book of crossword puzzles she'd ordered for our friend Anita up the cul-de-sac, who was recovering from a hip surgery, a box of oolong tea I'd ordered from a tea company in Portland because Susanna had developed an unreasonable affection for it after our daughter Larkin took us up there in 2022. The Amazon delivery photos showed each package on our porch, in plain afternoon light, in front of the door. Within 90 minutes of each delivery, the packages were gone. I called Amazon. They refunded the first one, replaced the second, and on the third one, a customer service representative in Indianapolis named Jolene asked, very gently, if I had Ring camera footage I might want to share with local law enforcement. I did not have a Ring camera. Susanna and I had agreed when we moved in that we did not need to live like a bank vault. I drove that afternoon to the Best Buy in Green Valley and bought 4 motion-activated cameras with infrared and cellular uplink, the same brand the lab used to use for chain of custody footage on outdoor evidence storage. By that evening, I had 2 pointed at the porch, 1 at the driveway, 1 at the side gate. 3 days later, another package vanished. The footage showed it. A woman in her early 60s, blonde, wearing a pearl-white Sundance Estates HOA polo shirt and a fluorescent visor, walked up our driveway at 3:47 in the afternoon, picked up the box from the porch, tucked it under her arm like she'd ordered it herself, and walked back down our driveway and out of frame, around the corner toward the clubhouse. I knew her face. Everybody in Sundance Estates knew her face. Carla Beauchamp had been HOA president since 2014. She drove a champagne Lincoln Navigator and wore a small gold cross on a thick gold chain. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the clip 3 times. Susanna came in with her reading glasses on and watched it once. Theron. I see her, hun. Why? I did not have an answer for that one yet. I had the footage. I had her face. I had the timestamp. I drove to the Henderson Police substation that afternoon and filed a written report. The officer at the front desk, a kind-eyed man named Sergeant Peterson, took the report carefully, asked me to email the video, and told me he would forward the matter to the Property Crimes Unit. He also told me, gently, that low-dollar package theft was difficult to prosecute and that I should not get my hopes up. I told him I understood. I drove home. I started a binder. The label, in my granddaughter's handwriting from a visit 2 summers earlier, said, Porch Watch. The HOA board meeting was on the 2nd Thursday of June, in the clubhouse multi-purpose room, with metal folding chairs, a card table at the front for the officers, and a coffee urn that had been brewing the same pot since approximately the Reagan administration. I went. I sat in the 3rd row. I had the binder under my arm and a flash drive in my breast pocket. Carla called the meeting to order at 6:03. She wore a pale blue blazer over a white shell, the same gold cross, and reading glasses on a beaded chain that swung when she gestured. She gabbled through the minutes, the treasurer's report, and a discussion of an irrigation breakage on the 8th tee of the practice green at the back of the development. At 6:26, when she opened the floor for resident comments, I stood up. Mrs. Beauchamp, board members, my name is Theron Whitlock. I live at 2212 Coyote Mesa Court. Over the past 5 weeks, 8 packages have disappeared from my front porch within 90 minutes of delivery. On the 11th of June, my home security camera captured the most recent theft. I'd like to share the footage with the board. Carla's face did not move. The treasurer, a retired insurance broker named Wade Heffler, glanced at her and then back at me with a careful expression. Of course, Mr. Whitlock, Carla said, smiling. Please go ahead. I plugged the flash drive into the laptop on the card table. The clubhouse projector blinked once, then displayed the 11-second clip on the wall behind her, 8 feet wide. The footage ran. Carla, in her pearl-white HOA polo, walked up my driveway, took the package, walked back down. The timestamp was clear. The face was clear. The room did not breathe. Carla laughed. It was a small, bright, practiced laugh. Oh, Theron, that's me. I remember now. I was conducting a courtesy package security check. We've had reports of porch pirates targeting Sundance Estates from outside the gate. And as president, I've taken it upon myself to walk the cul-de-sacs in the afternoons and temporarily secure unattended deliveries. I was going to bring it back to you the next day. I must have gotten distracted. You did not bring it back, Mrs. Beauchamp. Oh, I know. I do apologize. I'll get it to you this week. What was in it, dear? Replacement filters for my wife's medical nebulizer. A very small flinch passed across her face and was gone. Of course, I'll bring them over tomorrow morning. She did not bring them over tomorrow morning. She did not bring them over at all. The packages I had been losing did not come back. What did come back, on the Tuesday after the meeting, was a certified letter from the Sundance Estates HOA fining me $400 for creating a hostile environment for volunteer board members through public, unfounded accusations. I read the letter twice on my front porch. A roadrunner crossed the cul-de-sac at a slow, dignified pace. Susanna brought me out a glass of iced tea. How much? $400. That's how much they normally fine for an unauthorized lawn ornament. I know. I went inside, scanned the letter, and emailed it to a Henderson civil attorney named Esme Lillard, whom I'd known socially for years through the State Bar's annual fundraiser for the women's shelter in Boulder City. Esme called me back inside of 20 minutes. Theron, they put it in writing. After you played the footage at the meeting, after she admitted on the record she had your package, they put it in writing and certified mailed it to you. They are not, my friend, the brightest tools on the porch. What's our move? You don't pay it. You don't argue it. You let it sit. Meanwhile, I want every piece of camera footage you've collected in the last 5 weeks. I want every Amazon refund receipt. I want a contemporaneous list of every neighbor in Sundance Estates over 65 who you suspect might be losing packages they haven't reported. And I want you to file a formal complaint with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service online portal today. Federal. Mail theft is a Title 18 felony, Theron. You know this. The amounts add up. The pattern matters more than the dollars. I filed the federal complaint that night. I received an automated confirmation number within 90 seconds. The case status, when I checked it the next morning, said referred for review. I started a second binder. The label said Carla. She did not stop. People like Carla never stop. They adjust. The pattern shifted. The packages that arrived during daylight hours, when Susanna or I might be at the kitchen window, stayed where the carrier put them. The packages that arrived during the 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock midday window, when most of Sundance Estates was at the country club for lunch, vanished. The packages that arrived in the late afternoon, when Carla had her Pilates class at 4, also stayed. Carla had clocked our schedules. Carla had clocked the Amazon, FedEx, and UPS schedules. Carla had clocked, somewhere in her practiced internal mathematics, exactly when the porch went unwatched. I started running the surveillance like an evidence intake at the lab. I logged every delivery time, every camera trigger, every package ID number, every Amazon refund. I built a spreadsheet. I added a column for Ring doorbells at neighboring houses I could see from the upstairs window. I made notes on Carla's car movements, when her garage door went up, when her HOA polo shirt was visible through her front bay window. Within 3 weeks, I had a clean pattern. Carla was making 14 to 17 package pickups per week across at least 9 houses on Coyote Mesa Court, Bobcat Ridge Drive, and Saguaro Spring Lane. I matched 7 of those houses to residents I knew were over 70. I matched 2 to a young single mother who had moved in the previous year. The dollar value, by my conservative estimate, was running between $4,000 and $7,000 per month. I started knocking on doors. The first door I knocked on was Anita Vermeulen's, 3 houses up. Anita was 74, a retired oncology nurse from Sacramento, the woman whose hip recovery crossword book had been one of the first packages to vanish back in May. I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of decaf and a plate of butter cookies, and I asked her if she had been losing packages. Her eyes welled up before I finished the sentence. She had been losing packages since the previous September, 16 of them by her count. She had stopped reporting them to Amazon after the 3rd one, because she didn't want her daughter in San Diego to think she was getting forgetful. 2 contained prescription refills for her glaucoma drops. 1 had been a birthday gift for her great-nephew, a $10 science kit. She had cried about that one in the bathroom for an hour, because she'd had to call her niece and explain. I sat with her at her kitchen table for 90 minutes. I took notes. I listened. Over the next 2 weeks, I knocked on 22 doors. 18 of them opened. Of the 18, 14 had been losing packages. The total reported losses, when I added them up, came to over $41,000 across 2 years. The most painful one was Mr. Don Cleveland, who had lived alone since his wife Vesta had died of a stroke in 2021. Don was 81. He had been losing packages for 18 months. One of the missing packages, in March of the prior year, had contained a 30-day refill of Vesta's old blood pressure medication, which Don had quietly continued ordering after her death because he could not bring himself to call the pharmacy and tell them she was gone. Vesta's prescription had ended up, Don suspected, in Carla's clubhouse storage room. Don had cried when he told me. So had I. By the time I had filled the second binder, Susanna's nebulizer filters had been gone for 32 days. Susanna had asthma, triggered by Mojave dust storms, which we got about 4 times a year. We were 2 weeks into July. The monsoon was about to start. On the morning of July 18th, the dust came in over the Black Mountains at 5:45 a.m., the way it does every summer, with a sky the color of a bruised apricot and visibility down to a quarter mile by 6. By 7, Susanna was on the nebulizer she had been making do with on backup parts. By 7:15, the filter clogged. By 7:30, she could not catch her breath. By 7:45, I was driving her to Street. Rose Dominican Hospital, with the windows up and the AC on recirculate, and her hand on my forearm. She was admitted for observation overnight. The ER doctor, a young woman named Dr. Park, told me that without proper filtration, asthma exacerbations like this one could escalate quickly to respiratory failure in patients of Susanna's age and lung history. I sat in the chair next to Susanna's bed for the next 6 hours. Around 2 in the afternoon, while Susanna slept, I called Esme Lillard from the parking garage. "It just got worse, Esme." "How?" I told her. She was quiet a long time. "Theron, I'm going to call the U.S. Postal Inspector's regional office in Phoenix this afternoon. I think we just upgraded the case." The postal inspector who took the case was a woman named Inspector Renata Vasquez, out of the Phoenix field office. She was 46, 10 years on postal inspection service after 8 years with Arizona DPS narcotics, and she had the calm, settled voice of a woman who had executed exactly this kind of arrest about 90 times in her career, and was prepared to make number 91 feel just as professional as the first. She drove the 4 hours up from Phoenix on a Friday morning and met me at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a recorder. She read my entire spreadsheet without interrupting. She watched 17 minutes of camera footage. She read the witness statements from Anita Vermeulen and Don Cleveland. She made small, careful notes in the margins of her pad and pencil. When she finished, she set down her pen and looked up at me. "Mr. Whitlock, I'd like to ask a few questions. Is the witness Don Cleveland willing to testify?" "Yes." "Is the witness Anita Vermeulen willing to testify?" "Yes." "Are there other Sundance Estates residents over the age of 65 who have been losing federally protected mail and would be willing to provide written statements?" "At least 11 of them, on the record." "Any of them losing Social Security correspondence, Medicare statements, or government tax mail?" "At least 4. She wrote that down. She underlined it twice. "Mr. Whitlock, mail theft of any item delivered through the U.S. Postal Service is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1708, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison per count. Theft of Social Security or other federally issued correspondence is a separate Title 18 offense. I'm going to ask Mrs. Beauchamp's HOA storage room and the Beauchamp residence to be searched pursuant to a warrant. To get that warrant, I need a controlled delivery, a package she takes that I can prove was hers to take. On camera, with chain of custody. I'd like to handle the package myself." She looked at me for a long second. "Mr. Whitlock, you are a retired forensic chemist with 30 years in a state crime lab. You and I both know you have access to certain consumer-grade chemical anti-theft products that could be applied to a controlled delivery." "Yes, ma'am." "I cannot, as a federal officer, instruct you to do anything with a chemical product that might compromise the Postal Inspection Service's chain of evidence." "No, ma'am." "I can, however, instruct you that any package you mail to yourself through the U.S. Postal Service becomes federally protected mail the moment a postal carrier sets it on your porch. Anything that happens to that package after that point is, technically and legally, the perpetrator's problem." I let that sit on the table between us for a moment. Inspector Vasquez. "Mr. Whitlock, how much warning do you need before I do something?" She smiled, just a little, the first smile I had seen out of her all morning. "Mr. Whitlock, I would prefer not to be in Phoenix when the controlled delivery occurs. Phoenix is 4 hours away. I'd like to be much closer than that. Say, Saturday, the third Saturday in August, around 2 p.m., parked in an unmarked Crown Vic in the Walgreens parking lot at the corner of Anthem Parkway and Volunteer Boulevard. Saturday, August 17th, 2 p.m., Walgreens parking lot. With a deputy from the Henderson Police Department in the front seat with me and a federal evidence technician in the back." "Understood." "And Mr. Whitlock, one more thing. The Henderson postal carrier who runs Sundance Estates on Saturdays is named Hector Parnell. He is a 15-year USPS employee, married to one of my college roommates, and he will hand any package to you personally before placing it on the porch in your camera's frame. Anything that happens after that is, by federal definition, a clean federal mail theft." She closed her notepad. She zipped her thermos. She stood up. "I'd offer you a handshake, Mr. Whitlock, but I prefer not to be on contemporaneous camera at this stage of the investigation." "I understand, Inspector." She drove back to Phoenix that afternoon. I went down to the basement, opened the cabinet behind the workbench where I kept the consulting samples, and took out a quart bottle of a custom rhodamine base UV fluorescent dye I had formulated 5 years earlier on a private contract for a Pacific Northwest cannabis company that wanted to mark its own packaging against retail theft. The dye was non-toxic, non-flammable, food-safe in micro quantities, and stained human skin and most fabrics for between 14 and 28 days. Depending on contact time and ambient UV exposure, it glowed bright magenta under 550 nanometer light. It came off, eventually, only with a sustained acetone wash that no one without an industrial chemistry license was likely to attempt on themselves. I set the bottle on the bench. I started sketching the trigger mechanism on a yellow pad. It was July 24th. I had 3 weeks and 4 days. The discovery that broke the case open came 8 days later, from a source I had not been expecting. Anita Vermeulen called me on a Wednesday morning at 6:15, just after sunrise, while I was on the back patio with my coffee, watching the desert dawn turn the black mountains the color of new copper. Her voice on the phone was tight, the way a nurse's voice gets when she has stopped letting her own emotions interfere with what she has to say. "Theron, I need you to come over." I went over in my house slippers. Her front door was unlocked. She was in her sunroom, a yellow legal pad on her lap, 3 open shoeboxes on the coffee table, and the look on her face that her oncology patients had probably seen 1,000 times when she had to tell them what was on the chart. Anita. My friend, Vesta Cleveland, Don's wife, the blood pressure medication I told you about. Yes. Vesta died on March 17, 2021. The death certificate, which I have here from Don, lists the cause as a hypertensive cerebrovascular event. Her blood pressure had been managed for the previous decade by twice-monthly refills of lisinopril and amlodipine. Don picked them up himself at the Walgreens on Anthem Parkway every other Tuesday. The prescriptions had started transitioning to direct mail order through her insurance plan in January of 2021. Don has the records. He brought them over to me last night when he couldn't sleep. The first 3 mail order refills, which arrived in January, February, and March of 2021, never made it to the house. Don thought at the time the insurance had screwed up. He paid out of pocket for emergency 30-day refills at Walgreens for January and February. By March, he was traveling to a daughter's wedding in Reno. Vesta missed 3 days of medication. She had the stroke on the morning of the 17th. I sat down very carefully across from her. Anita. It might be coincidence, Theron. Vesta was 76. Strokes happen. But 3 missed days of antihypertensives in a woman with that history is the textbook recipe. And the packages went missing. Did Carla live in the neighborhood in March of 2021? She was already HOA president. She had been HOA president since 2014. We sat in the sunroom in silence for a long time. The light coming through Anita's sliding glass door was the bright pink of a new desert morning, the kind of light my forensic chemistry instructor at UNLV had once described as the cleanest reading light in the world. "I want to bring this to Inspector Vasquez," I said. "Yes, you do." "I want to bring it to her with everything else. I will testify to it. Don will testify to it. We have the death certificate. We have the prescription records. We have the mail order shipping confirmations. We have the Walgreens emergency fill receipts. We have the timeline." I called Inspector Vasquez at 7:05 from Anita's sunroom. She picked up on the second ring. "Inspector Vasquez." "Inspector, I think there may be a death involved." She did not say anything for a moment. "Walk me through it, Mr. Whitlock." I walked her through it. She made me stop twice while she wrote things down. When I finished, she was quiet for an even longer moment. "Mr. Whitlock, I am going to make some calls. The Postal Inspection Service does not normally consider a deceased victim's intervening medical event a direct chargeable cause, unless there is unbroken evidentiary chain. But the pattern just changed. We are no longer talking about a property crime ring. We are talking about a woman who has been intercepting prescription medication, Social Security checks, and Medicare correspondence from elderly residents for 6 years. That changes the ceiling on this case considerably." "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Whitlock, your controlled delivery is now scheduled in 12 days. "Understood." I hung up. Anita reached across the coffee table and took my hand. We sat that way for a while. The case had just become a different case. The dye bomb was, in chemistry terms, the easy part. I built the trigger from a modified pressure-release mousetrap, the kind you can buy at any True Value hardware store. With the spring arm replaced by a small bent piece of stainless steel, I shaped on the bench grinder in the garage. The trigger sat under the lid of the package, held closed by the 2 pieces of brown packing tape I had used to seal the cardboard. When the lid came off, that is, Carla put her hands on the box and pulled the tape back, the spring released, the arm snapped, and a small glass ampule of the rhodamine-based dye broke against a brass cup pressurized by a tiny CO2 cartridge salvaged from a recycled paintball loader. The dye atomized through a small array of brass nozzles, arranged in a 120-degree cone, aimed upward at the face of whoever was opening the box. The contents above the trigger were a small, weighted Yeti coffee tumbler I had ordered specifically because the box would feel reasonable in the hand. The tumbler itself was wrapped in tissue paper, sprayed lightly with the same dye, so that anyone sorting through the contents in confusion afterward would only spread the marker further. I tested the trigger 17 times in the basement on cardboard boxes filled with crumpled newspaper. 16 of 17 activations were clean. The 17th misfired because I'd packed the CO2 cartridge with too much torque and partially burst its seal during prep. I rewrote the prep protocol on a yellow pad. I tested 4 more times. All clean. Susanna watched one of the tests from the bottom of the basement stairs. She did not say anything for a long moment when the magenta cloud blossomed out of the cardboard. Theron. Yes, hun. That looks expensive. The die is $600 a quart. The trigger is $12. The cartridge is $1.75. The Yeti tumbler is $40. How long does the die last on skin? 2 to 3 weeks under normal conditions. Much longer if she touches her face. Considerably longer under UV light, which I assume the Henderson booking facility has on its photo desk. Susanna nodded once, slowly. Theron. Yes, hun. Don't miss. I won't, hun. The Yeti tumbler box went into the U.S. mail on Wednesday, August 14th, addressed to me at our Sundance Estates address, sent priority mail from a Las Vegas postal facility on Sahara Avenue, with a tracking number Inspector Vasquez had pre-cleared with USPS Regional. Hector Parnell, the Saturday route carrier, would receive the package at the Henderson Distribution Center on Saturday morning, place it in his afternoon delivery queue, and run it to my porch between 1:55 and 2:05 p.m. I spent the 3 days before the controlled delivery doing 4 things. First, I positioned 3 additional cameras, one in the upstairs guest bedroom with a long lens aimed at the clubhouse storage door, one on my side gate, and one inside the die package itself, hidden in a hollowed false bottom. All 3 uploaded continuously to cloud storage. Second, I drove Anita Vermeulen and 3 boxes of her late husband's records out to her sister's house in Sun City. I did not want her in Sundance Estates the day the die went off. Third, I walked the cul-de-sac twice and counted 7 neighbors with a view of my porch. I noted which ones would likely be home Saturday afternoon. I wanted witnesses without injuring any of them. Fourth, I sat at the kitchen table with Susanna and we wrote out, in longhand, exactly what I would say to Inspector Vasquez when the federal officers walked into the clubhouse. I wanted my statement free of forensic jargon, free of anger, and free of anything that could be edited out of context for the news. On Saturday morning at 6 a.m., I checked the cameras. I checked the die package. I checked the trigger one final time, sealed it, and retaped the box. I made coffee. I sat on the back patio. I waited for 2 p.m. Carla, of course, did not know any of this. What Carla knew on the morning of Saturday, August 17th, was that Theron Whitlock had become a problem. The HOA had received a discovery subpoena from Esme Lillard the previous week. 2 reporters from the Las Vegas CBS affiliate had left voicemails on Carla's phone, asking for comment on an investigation into package theft in the Anthem area. And 3 different Sundance Estates residents had stopped speaking to her at the clubhouse pool the previous weekend. Carla responded the way people like Carla respond. She accelerated. On Monday afternoon, she filed a parallel HOA bylaw amendment proposal to the board, requesting that all external investigative activity by residents involving the HOA or its officers require advance written board approval, with a $5,000 fine for unauthorized investigation. She filed it on letterhead. She emailed it to all 112 households. On Tuesday, she called my home phone 3 times, between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., asking, in 3 different voicemail messages of escalating tone, for me to call her back to discuss the lawsuit nonsense before things go any further. On Wednesday, her husband Garth Beecham, a quiet retired regional manager for an industrial cleaning supply company, who had spent the previous 15 years pretending he had nothing to do with what his wife did at the HOA board, came to my front door with a manila envelope. He stood on my porch in a polo shirt and pleated khakis, and would not look me in the eye. Mr. Whitlock, Carla asked me to deliver this. She wanted to do it herself, but our attorney advised her not to. Garth, I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. He looked up sharply at that. His mouth worked. For a moment I thought he was going to say something. He didn't. He set the envelope on my porch table, turned around, and walked back across the cul-de-sac. The envelope contained a draft civil complaint, prepared by a Las Vegas Strip area attorney named Devlin Ashcroft, naming me personally for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, tortious interference with HOA governance, and harassment. The complaint sought damages of $1.4 million and a permanent injunction barring me from discussing Mrs. Beauchamp in any public or private setting. It was, on its face, a textbook slap suit, the kind of nuisance filing designed to bury a legitimate complainant under fees and chill the speech of every neighbor who might be inclined to come forward. I scanned it and emailed it to Esme. Esme called me back inside of 30 minutes. Theron, Devlin Ashcroft is a Strip personal injury lawyer who has never tried a defamation case in his life. He's billing Carla's husband $600 an hour to draft a complaint that won't survive a Nevada anti-slap motion. We will laugh his appearance out of court inside of 45 days. The motion alone will probably cost the Beauchamps about $30,000 to defend. Don't tell him that. I won't. I'm filing the anti-slap motion the morning after your Saturday delivery, by the way. By that point, your defamation defense and Carla's federal arrest will be running in parallel. The judge will be in a very specific kind of mood. On Thursday, 3 more residents knocked on my door, on 3 separate visits, to tell me they had also been losing packages. 2 were over 70. One was a quiet single mother of 3 named Dawn Rooney, who had moved into Sundance Estates the previous September and had been losing about 4 packages a month since. Each of them sat at my kitchen table. Each of them gave a written statement. Each of them signed. Susanna brought out cookies and tea each time. By Friday afternoon, she had baked 3 trays of oatmeal cookies and put them in Tupperware on the sideboard. "For witnesses," she said. "For witnesses," I said. Carla, meanwhile, was having a difficult week. Wade Heffler, the treasurer, called me on Friday evening from his car, parked at a Black Bear diner outside Boulder City, to tell me, very quietly, that he had been documenting Carla's behavior for the past 2 years out of personal concern, and that he would be willing to provide written sworn testimony to any federal investigator I designated. He had attached a folder to the email he'd sent me at 5 o'clock. It contained 93 pages of HOA financial records that did not match the bank statements. Carla had also been embezzling. I forwarded the folder to Inspector Vasquez at 6:58 that night. Vasquez called back at 7:03. "Mr. Whitlock, tomorrow's package now has additional company in the warrant package. We're looking at federal mail theft, federal interception of government correspondence, federal wire fraud, and a probable state-level embezzlement referral." "Understood, Inspector." "Mr. Whitlock, get a good night's sleep." I did not. I sat on the back patio until midnight, watching the desert stars come out over the Black Mountains. Saturday morning the dust was clear. The sky was pale blue, the kind of August Mojave morning that promises a 114-degree afternoon. I made coffee at 5:45. I went down to the basement and ran one final check on the trigger assembly under bench light. Hector Parnell knocked on my front door at 1:53 p.m. He was a compact man in his late 40s, with a graying mustache and a Postal Service polo darkened at the collar with the day's heat. He shook my hand. He gave me the package. He confirmed, on a small handheld scanner he carried, that the parcel was delivered to my custody at 1:53 and 22 seconds. Then he waited while I walked to the porch with the box, set it carefully in front of the door at the camera's preferred angle, and stepped back inside. He waved at the porch camera. He went back to his truck. He drove on. I went upstairs to the guest bedroom and sat in the chair I had set up at the long-lensed camera. I opened the cellular tablet that mirrored the porch camera live to my hand. I waited. Carla appeared at 1:58. She was in a coral pink visor, her standard pearl white HOA polo, white capri pants, and tennis shoes. She came out of her front door, glanced both ways down the cul-de-sac, and walked across the pavement at the pace of a woman who had made this exact walk 400 times in the previous 6 years, and had stopped bothering to fake the casualness. She came up my driveway. She bent at the waist. She picked up the package. She straightened, tucked the box under her arm, turned, and walked back across the cul-de-sac. She did not go home. She walked past her own driveway and continued down the cul-de-sac toward the Sundance Estates clubhouse, 300 yards away. Inspector Vasquez was watching the same camera feed on her own tablet from the Walgreens parking lot at the corner of Anthem Parkway and Volunteer Boulevard. She texted me at 1:59. Got it. Stand by. Carla unlocked the clubhouse side door with her HOA officer key fob at 2:01. She walked through the multi-purpose room, past the metal folding chairs and the Reagan-era coffee urn. She unlocked the storage closet at the back of the room. She stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. I had not been able to put a camera inside her clubhouse storage closet. The box camera, however, was inside the box. For 37 seconds, the in-box camera saw only the inside of cardboard. Then it saw light. Then it saw a wedge of fluorescent ceiling. Then it saw Carla's face from 12 inches away as she pulled the lid up. The trigger arm released. The CO2 cartridge ruptured. The rhodamine dye atomized into a 120-degree upward cone with a pressure of 63 pounds per square inch. The footage from inside the box went magenta and cut out at the moment the camera's lens was painted over. The audio, however, kept rolling for another 4 seconds. There was a small, wet hiss. There was a sharp inhale. There was a single, perfectly clear word spoken at conversational volume by a 61-year-old white woman in a suburban clubhouse storage closet outside Henderson, Nevada. Oh. And then, a beat later, in a different and much more compressed voice. Oh no. I sat in the upstairs guest bedroom and watched the camera feed go dark with the blank, professional satisfaction of a man who had spent 3 weeks building exactly the right machine for exactly the right job. 3 minutes later, the side door of the clubhouse opened. A figure exited at a fast walk, not quite a run. The face, hands, and chest of the figure were a vivid, saturated, fluorescent magenta. The hair was streaked with it. The white capri pants were spotted with it. The pearl white HOA polo was no longer pearl white. She was trying to wipe her face with the inside of her shirt as she walked. The shirt was making it worse. She reached her own front door and went inside. The cul-de-sac was empty for 90 seconds. Then her garage door went up, and the Champagne Lincoln Navigator backed out at speed. She drove off in the direction of the gate. My phone buzzed. Inspector Vasquez. Mr. Whitlock, confirm visual. Magenta from the chest up, Inspector. Streaked hair, attempting to wipe. Just left in her Navigator headed northbound on Anthem Parkway. We are following her in a black Suburban 2 blocks back. She is currently driving toward what I assume is a CVS on Eastern Avenue. We will be at her residence with the warrant by 4 p.m. Henderson PD has units staged on her cul-de-sac as of 3:15. The federal evidence team is en route. Understood, Inspector. Mr. Whitlock. Yes, ma'am. That dye is something else. I let myself smile. Yes, Inspector. Carla did not return home immediately. She drove first to a CVS on Eastern Avenue, where she bought nail polish remover, makeup remover wipes, lava soap, and sunscreen, presumably hoping to scrub the dye off in the bathroom. The dye did not come off, because the rhodamine was bonded to keratin and fabric proteins by a color-fast formulation engineered specifically to resist consumer-grade solvents. She emerged from the bathroom exactly the same color, only now smelling strongly of acetone. She drove home. She arrived in her cul-de-sac at 4:06 p.m. 5 vehicles were waiting for her. 2 were Henderson police cruisers, parked at the entrance to the cul-de-sac, lights off, blocking civilian through traffic. 1 was a black Chevrolet Suburban, parked on the street directly in front of her house. 1 was a USPS evidence collection van, parked behind the Suburban. 1 was an unmarked dark blue Crown Victoria, from which Inspector Renata Vasquez emerged in a navy windbreaker that read U.S. Postal Inspection Service in 3-inch reflective letters across the back. Carla parked the Navigator in her driveway and sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel for 40 seconds, looking at the assembly of vehicles in front of her own house. The driver's side window slowly fogged from her breath. Inspector Vasquez approached the driver's side door. She was joined by a Henderson PD detective named Sergeant Imogene Lassiter, who I had spoken to twice on the phone, but had never met in person. They knocked on the window. Carla rolled it down. The dye on her face caught the late afternoon Mojave sun in a way that made the entire cul-de-sac look momentarily as though it were lit by a single neon sign. "Mrs. Beauchamp," Inspector Vasquez said, in the voice she had described to me in my kitchen 4 weeks earlier. "I'm Inspector Renata Vasquez with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. I have a federal warrant for your arrest on 47 counts of mail theft in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1708, 4 counts of theft of government correspondence, 3 counts of identity fraud, and 1 count of wire fraud relating to embezzlement from the Sundance Estates Homeowners Association. You are also being held on a parallel state warrant from Henderson Police on charges of grand larceny, elder abuse, and possession of stolen property. You have the right to remain silent." Carla stared at her in silence. The dye made the whites of her eyes look very white. She got out of the navigator. They cuffed her hands gently in front of her body, not behind, because Inspector Vasquez had told me later the policy at the Postal Inspection Service for nonviolent suspects was front cuffs unless there was reason to believe a flight risk. Carla cooperated. She did not say anything. She was led to the black Suburban by Sergeant Lassiter and a federal evidence technician named Brennan Vale. By that point, 3 news vehicles had arrived. KLAS, KSNV, and the local Fox affiliate had all gotten the call from Inspector Vasquez's PIO at 2:20 p.m., which had been her plan all along. Cameras were rolling. The arrest was streamed live on 3 Vegas evening news websites by 4:18 p.m. The dye photographed even better on broadcast video than it had on my home cameras. It glowed. The clubhouse storage closet was opened by federal evidence technicians at 4:45 p.m. with a master key that Wade Heffler had voluntarily provided. The closet, which was approximately the size of a walk-in pantry, contained 412 unopened packages, 300 of them addressed to Sundance Estates residents, ranging in delivery date from January 2019 to August 17th of the current year. It also contained 3 filing boxes of intercepted mail, Social Security correspondence, Medicare statements, prescription bottles still sealed, IRS letters, bank statements, and the personal correspondence of at least 19 residents over the age of 70. It contained a printed inventory ledger, in Carla's handwriting, listing every item by marketplace resale price, with running totals organized by quarter going back 6 years. The total estimated street value of the recovered goods was, per Inspector Vasquez's written report later, just over $86,000. The total federal sentencing exposure on the mail theft counts alone was over 20 years. Garth Beauchamp surrendered himself voluntarily at the Henderson PD substation at 6 p.m. He had retained a different attorney, not Devlin Ashcroft, and had agreed to cooperate fully with the federal investigation in exchange for consideration on his own accessory charges. By 8 p.m., the story had been picked up by the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the Associated Press, and 3 national broadcast desks. By 10 p.m., Carla's booking photo had been released by Henderson PD as part of standard public records procedure. The booking photo, by every objective measure, was the most fluorescent magenta human face the Henderson Police Department had ever processed. By 11 p.m., the photo was the second most shared image on the Las Vegas subreddit. By midnight, the comment thread had grown to 900 posts, every 4th one referencing the headline, "Karen Stays Pink for 3 weeks." The dye, as I had told Susanna in the basement on July 24th, lasted between 2 and 3 weeks. It was actually closer to 4. Carla Beauchamp pleaded guilty in federal court in late October to a consolidated 32-count indictment covering mail theft, theft of government correspondence, wire fraud, and embezzlement. She accepted a stipulated 38-month sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, with 3 years supervised release and restitution of just over $114,000. She also pleaded to parallel state grand larceny and elder abuse charges, given a concurrent 18-month sentence. She declined to make a statement at sentencing. The booking photo had, by then, been viewed roughly 7 million times. Garth Beauchamp accepted a deferred prosecution agreement on the accessory charges, which required 18 months of community service at a Henderson assisted living facility, full repayment of his portion of the wire fraud restitution, and a permanent ban on serving in any HOA officer or finance role anywhere in the state of Nevada for life. He moved out of Sundance Estates in January, and last I heard, had taken a small apartment in Boulder City. The Sundance Estates Homeowners Association dissolved its existing board in November and elected a new one led by Wade Heffler, who agreed to take the presidency under the condition that the bylaws be permanently amended to require any HOA officer with access to common area mail or storage to undergo annual background checks and submit quarterly inventory reports. Anita Vermeulen was elected vice president. She accepted with the same grace she had shown me in her sunroom in July. The Unattended Package Committee, which Carla had invented on her own letterhead in 2014 and operated unilaterally for 10 years, was formally abolished. Esme Lillard's anti-SLAPP motion sailed through 8th Judicial District Court. The defamation suit against me was dismissed with prejudice in September, and Devlin Ashcroft was personally sanctioned $6,000 in attorney's fees to be paid out of his own pocket. He wrote a check. The civil restitution to the 23 identified victims totaled, after Esme's fees, just over $81,000. The largest individual payment went to Don Cleveland, who used it to commission a small headstone addition to Vesta's grave. The headstone now reads, beneath her name and dates, beloved and believed. He drove me out to the cemetery one Sunday afternoon in November to show it to me. We stood there for a while. He did not cry. I almost did. My own portion of the restitution I did not keep. I called Wade and proposed something. He took it to the new board. They approved it unanimously the following Tuesday. We named the program the Sundance Vigilance Network. The fund pays for free outdoor security cameras and quarterly mail theft awareness sessions in partnership with Las Vegas Metro for any resident over 65 within the Anthem area zip codes who requests them. The first installation went up at Don Cleveland's house in December. Since then, we have installed cameras at 31 additional homes. The Henderson Police Department reports that mail theft incidents in those zip codes have dropped by 41% year over year. Inspector Vasquez sent me a handwritten card at Christmas. It said, simply, "Nice work." I also volunteered to teach a 4-week summer enrichment course in introductory forensic chemistry at Coronado High School starting next June. Susanna and I will fund it ourselves. 18 kids signed up in the first week of registration. One of them, the granddaughter of a Sundance Estates resident named Flora McMurtry, whose package losses had topped $600, signed up specifically because she wants to be a postal inspector when she grows up. I told her Inspector Vasquez would visit her class in person. Inspector Vasquez has confirmed. The cameras stay up on my own porch. Susanna and I have both stopped pretending we don't need them. The cul-de-sac has been quiet since August. The packages get to the door now. The neighbors wave when they walk past in the mornings. If your packages have been disappearing for months, write the dates down, photograph the porch, pull the camera footage, find your Esme, find your Inspector Vasquez. The petty tyrants of the world have always counted on the assumption that elderly people in suburbs would never be believed. They are wrong. Tell me your story in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And what did your HOA take from you? Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The next story I have for you involves a small-town diner, a stolen recipe, and a quiet old line cook in eastern Kentucky who waited 11 years to hand someone the menu they deserved. Pull up a chair.
What's there with me about Terrence's love story, Eden the Dive Bomb? Even though the dive bomb is one of the most satisfying things this channel has ever told you about. What's there with me is that an 81-year-old widower named Dan Cleveland spent 2 years thinking the U.S. Postal Service has failed his dying wife, when in fact a woman 2 doors down has been intercepting their prescription medication for personal profit. What's there with me is that an oncology nurse named Anita Vermeulen stopped reporting her stolen packages because she didn't want her daughter to think she was getting forgetful. That's how the scheme works. They feed on shame. They count on people not talking. Terrence broke that the moment he started knocking on doors. 23 neighbors gave statement because when quiet retired chemists sat at their kitchen tables, bring their coffees. And listen, if your packages has been disappearing, talk to your neighbors. Pull the camera footage. File the photo complaint. Fire Inspector Rescue. Drop a comment if you ever stood across the lines from a Karen with a clipboard. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A small town dinner, a stolen receipt, an innocent Kentucky like cook. I see you there.